The Let Them Theory by Mel Robbins. At 41 years old, a woman found herself staring at the ceiling, paralyzed by an $800,000 mountain of debt, unemployment, and her kind-hearted, calm, and dependable husband, Chris's failing restaurant business. To cope with the suffocating anxiety, her main strategy was avoidance. She drank, she hit the snooze button, and she hid from her reality. But one morning, inspired by a televised rocket launch, she forced herself out of bed by counting backward from 5. That simple psychological trick, the 5-second rule, interrupted her brain's habit of overthinking and propelled her into action. Over the next decade, small, terrifying moves forward helped her rebuild her life, launch a massively successful speaking career, and pull her family out of financial ruin. She had mastered the art of pushing herself. Yet, despite her hard-won success, she realized she was still exhausted, stressed, and constantly frustrated. She had fixed her internal motivation, but she was still burning precious energy trying to manage, control, and please everyone around her. The profound shift in her perspective arrived years later on the chaotic day of her youngest son's high school prom. Oakley, a handsome, easily annoyed teenage son, was in a last-minute scramble. The tuxedo was barely sorted, the requested sneakers were a mess, and he had explicitly forbidden his mother from bringing a custom-made floral corsage for his date. Unwilling to relinquish control, she smuggled the corsage in her purse anyway, resulting in an incredibly awkward exchange when the date revealed she had already made her own. As if the tension wasn't high enough, a sudden torrential downpour began. The 20 impeccably dressed teenagers had absolutely no dinner reservations and casually decided to walk through the pouring rain to a tiny 4-table taco shed. Panic seized her. She immediately whipped out her phone, desperately trying to secure a proper restaurant reservation for 20 dripping wet teenagers. That was when Kendall, her observant, stylish middle daughter, who was home from college, firmly gripped her arm. Kendall looked her in the eye and delivered a life-altering directive. "Mom, if Oakley and his friends want to go to a taco bar for pre-prom, let them. Let them get soaked. Let his shoes get ruined. It's their prom, not yours. Just drop it." The effect was instantaneous. 2 simple words broke the spell of her anxiety. She handed her son $40, wished him well, and watched the teenagers splash joyfully into the mud. She suddenly realized that other people hold absolutely no power over you unless you actively give it to them. Relinquishing the compulsive need to manage other people's experiences was intoxicating. She began applying this concept to everything. If a cashier was moving at a glacial pace, she let them. If her family was running late, she let them. If relatives judged her career, she let them. However, she quickly discovered a dangerous loophole in this newfound emotional detachment. One afternoon, while scrolling through social media, she stumbled upon photos of a lavish girls' weekend trip. Peering closely at the screen, her stomach plummeted as she recognized the faces of her longtime suburban friends laughing over brunch. She had not been invited. Her immediate instinct was to spiral into rejection and self-blame, analyzing what she had done wrong to be excluded. She repeated the 2 words to herself to detach from the pain, giving herself a jolt of moral superiority over the women who had left her out. But sitting alone on her couch in a state of detached superiority was isolating. It did not create the fulfilling social life she craved. It was then she realized that the theory is fundamentally incomplete without a second, crucial step. Detachment is merely the first half of the equation. The true power lies in taking responsibility for your own response. The formula had to be, let them and then let me. Let them go on their trip without me, she realized. But let me be honest with myself about my own lack of effort. She recognized that she had been burying herself in work for years, rarely reaching out or hosting gatherings. As an adult, nobody is coming to rescue your social life. It is entirely your responsibility to build it. By shifting her focus from their actions to her own agency, she reclaimed her power. This 2-step framework quickly became a survival tool for navigating the daily neurological hijack of stress. The human brain's amygdala is hardwired to react to external threats with a fight-or-flight response. When a deeply hacking, openly coughing man sat directly behind her on a crucial flight, her brain immediately flooded with anger and panic over getting sick before a major speaking tour. Her initial instinct was to glare, huff, and attempt to force the stranger to change his behavior. But attempting to control others only amplifies our own stress. She applied the framework. Let him cough. It was not her job to police a stranger's hygiene. Let me put on my noise-canceling headphones, wrap a thick scarf over my nose and mouth, and protect my own peace. By focusing exclusively on her own response, she bypassed her brain's stress circuitry and remained calm. This same principle proved to be the ultimate antidote to the paralyzing fear of other people's opinions. For 2 agonizing years at the start of her speaking career, she had drafted hundreds of promotional social media posts, only to delete them before publishing. She was terrified of what her old friends, family, and acquaintances would think of her newfound ambition. She was constantly editing her life to avoid hypothetical judgment. But the brutal truth of human nature is that adults are entirely free to think whatever they want, and they will inevitably have negative thoughts about you. Even the people who love you most harbor quiet judgments about your choices. It is a neurological impossibility to control the tens of thousands of random thoughts in someone else's head. By internalizing this, she was finally able to post her content. Let them think she was arrogant or foolish. Let me build a life that makes me proud. She leaned on the wisdom of the poet Mary Oliver, who famously asked what we plan to do with our one wild and precious life. You cannot spend that precious life shrinking to fit the unchangeable opinions of others. The framework also provided a profound lens for handling the explosive emotional reactions of adults. A depth psychologist once explained to her that most adults are essentially emotionally dysregulated 8-year-olds walking around in grown-up bodies. When a childhood friend gives you the silent treatment, or a relative throws a passive-aggressive tantrum, they are simply children who never learned to process complex emotions safely. She reflected with deep shame on her own past behavior when a new couple from Atlanta moved into her neighborhood and seemingly hijacked her beloved friend group. Consumed by jealousy, she had acted like a bitter, pouting child, crossing her arms at barbecues and exuding a toxic energy that ultimately pushed her friends further away. Had she known the framework back then, she could have allowed the new neighbors to bond with her friends without perceiving it as a personal attack. You are never responsible for managing another adult's emotional outbursts, but you are always responsible for remaining the grounded, mature adult in the room. Nowhere is this maturity more necessary than in the battle against chronic comparison. Her driven, deeply feeling oldest daughter, Sawyer, spent years torturing herself by comparing her body type and natural talents to her stylish sister Kendall. This type of comparison, focusing on fixed, unchangeable genetic traits, is nothing but self-torture. But there is a second type of comparison that acts as a powerful teacher. Years ago, the author visited a friend's newly renovated, spectacular mansion. Stepping into a massive playroom featuring custom queen-size bunk beds, she was consumed by a blinding, fiery jealousy. On the car ride home, she threw a miserable tantrum at her husband, blaming his restaurant career for their lack of wealth. But that jealousy was actually a message from her future self. She wasn't angry at her friend, she was angry at herself for abandoning her own ambition and waiting for her husband to provide her dream life. Let them have the gorgeous house. Let me put in the 15 years of grueling, consistent work required to build my own financial empire. This proactive ownership is especially critical for adult friendships, which undergo a massive, silent shift in our 20s, known as the Great Scattering. The effortless proximity of high school and college disappears, leaving adults isolated and confused. When she and Chris moved to a small rural Vermont town, she spent an entire year crying in her house, waiting for friends to magically appear. Finally, her daughters forced her to walk up a neighbor's driveway to introduce herself to Mia, a warm, receptive woman who quickly became a walking partner. She realized she had to go first. She started walking into her local coffee shop and actively asking for names, introducing herself to Kevin, the tall, bearded barista, and a young couple named Gregory and Jordan. She logged their details in her phone, building a network of weak ties that eventually blossomed into a vibrant, supportive community. Friendships fade when proximity, timing, or energy shift. You must allow people to flow in and out of your life without taking it personally, while constantly taking the initiative to create new connections. This boundary setting is vital because no matter how deeply you love someone, you cannot force them to change. The human brain is wired to move toward immediate pleasure and avoid pain. When you nag a spouse to go to the gym, you are threatening their innate need for autonomy, prompting them to dig their heels in and resist. People only change when the internal tension between their current reality and their desired future becomes unbearable. Instead of pressure, she learned to use the ABC loop: apologize and ask open-ended questions, back off to observe their behavior, and celebrate any small progress. And when a loved one is truly spiraling into addiction or severe mental health struggles, attempting to rescue them only ensures they will continue to drown. When Chris was at his lowest point with his failing restaurant and drinking to cope, his brother flatly refused to loan him bailout money. By allowing Chris to hit rock bottom and face the natural consequences of his choices, his brother forced him to finally quit the business and save himself. You can stand by someone's side and hold a light in the darkness, but you must let them walk the path of their own healing. Ultimately, this entire philosophy culminates in how we choose love. Dating is not about convincing someone to like you. It is a process of elimination. If someone likes you, their behavior will make it obvious. If they don't, you will be confused. A renowned dating coach once shared how his now wife set a firm boundary early in their relationship, calmly stating that she valued her time too much to invest in a casual fling with no future. She was entirely willing to let him walk away, and that display of self-respect instantly made him commit. Conversely, when Sawyer faced a devastating breakup with the man she thought she would marry, the pain was a neurological severing of deeply intertwined habits. Surviving it required absolute adherence to the framework, letting him walk away, enforcing a strict 30-day no-contact rule, removing environmental triggers, and giving her bedroom a makeover to signal a new chapter. The grand illusion of life is that we can somehow control the weather of other people's actions, opinions, and emotions. We cannot. But we are in absolute control of how we navigate beneath that sky. The ultimate realization is that you will spend every single second of your existence with only one person, yourself. You are the true love of your life. By letting the world be exactly what it is, you finally free yourself to build the wild, precious, and fiercely independent life you were always meant to live.